Hey gorgeous soul, I'm Zoe and welcome to the oasis.state podcast, a space where we decode life's mysteries and embrace the what the fuck moments that make it magical. Let this podcast be your trusted companion on your wild journey of transformation, healing and soul expansion. Together, we'll dive deep, celebrate our technicolor existence and turn life's chaos into pure magic. Hello, gorgeous soul, and welcome back to another episode of the oasis.state podcast. So this episode is the first solo episode I am recording for 2025, which is pretty cool. And also the first episode I am recording in my very own studio. If you've listened to my previous episodes, I've shared a bit about my crazy experience of trying to find this new home and this making this next chapter of my life a reality. So being here is just so significant and so good for my nervous system. But I've actually been here for a month and haven't recorded anything yet, but I just needed to take some time actually and just land and ground and regulate and just be kind to myself basically. And also basically channel through this process and the inspiration for this podcast episode, because I just released an emotional alchemy course yesterday. It's a self-paced course, basically a quick and repeatable emotional reset practice that I basically really heavily had to rely on over the last month, because I had a bit of a backlog of emotional overwhelm that I needed to process. And as I mentioned, it was a bit of a process, a different one, finding this studio. And from the time I moved out of my old share house situation, which was quite dysregulating, quite toxic and quite stressful, I actually had 3.5 months of basically couch surfing. I never actually slept on a couch, but the term of just staying at friends' houses, staying in their spare rooms and while I was doing that for 3.5 months, I was also navigating a breakup from a long-term relationship that I've been in. And just basically there was a lot to process, and I was doing my best to process that in those moments. But I also had this sneaky feeling that there was going to be more that I needed to process when I landed here in this studio, because it's sort of like, I don't know what you'd call the process, whether it's conscious or unconscious, but you sort of withhold your desire or your intention to process heavier emotions if you're not feeling safe in your physical surroundings. And of course I was feeling safe with friends and family, etc. But when you need to dive into an emotional alchemy process, which I will explain soon, it's best done in like a safe and nurturing environment and in solitude. And of course, all of my friends' places were physically safe, but I didn't really have the autonomy or the solitude to process these things. So that's what I've been doing for the last month now that I have my own space. I'm getting back into, just a really welcome sense of consistency and being able to nurture myself. So and from that last month or the last few months, I've birthed this beautiful emotional alchemy process and created it into a course. It's not like revolutionary or new or anything, but this, as in like, if you're a very emotionally intelligent or aware person and you purchase this course, it'll be, it is. No, I'm downplaying it. It's a really potent and beautiful process that I am just so grateful for. And I just felt really inspired to share it with the world, because I feel like we are all walking around as these scared, emotionally overwhelmed beings. And because of, say, the fast-paced society that we live in, the collective misunderstanding of emotions, so like a lack of emotional intelligence, whether that comes from, family situations that weren't super, consistent when we were younger, our parents not having emotional intelligence, our communities, and or the collective, just, basically there's a huge lack of emotional awareness out there. And then for reasons that I'll explain, men and women have these sort of blocks for wanting to be present with their emotions. And I'm not mentioning any of these things to sort of point the finger. I mention these things as a self-compassion practice, because if you're like, what the fuck, I feel like a kindergartner when it comes to my understanding of emotions and intelligence and basically our innate and super powerful ability to befriend these emotions rather than experience them as hindrances. It's sort of, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Like, it's not about blaming the external experience. It's about realizing this is how we got here. But then as the empowered kings and queens that we are, we need to start taking some responsibility for our emotions and educating ourselves, being intentional with our emotional processing experience. And in my experience, by repeating this process again and again, I've been able to shift into a place of basically my natural state of being now is a place of alignment. And then I'm super sensitive to experiences of misalignment. So I'm very grateful that most of my experience with life is from a place of alignment, but it doesn't mean I'm going to exist in that space forever. And basically, that's not what the human experience is about. We are humans, we're messy, we're complicated, we're multifaceted, but the idea and through my emotional intelligence journey, I've been able to pivot from really, really far down the misalignment bandwidth where I'm just walking around like in an absolute state of dysregulation. My nervous system is dysregulated. I'm in fight or flight. And I've been able to just again and again and again show up for and understand myself as a holistic being and show up for the emotional overwhelm that I'm experiencing. And usually when I can shift those emotions, which is sometimes just a somatic practice, so very body-based, I can get to the root cause of what was causing those emotions. And sometimes sometimes it's the most whack limiting story that you've been holding on to, and you don't like pull that to the surface and then sort of beat yourself up about it. But if you are not regulating your emotions and alchemizing them, pretty consistently, if you're in a very overwhelmed state, you will never get to these root causes and experiences. So over time, being very compassionate with myself, but then also moving into the driver's seat and that very healthy masculine, like as in energy, masculine energy, and taking responsibility for myself and my experience with life and my relationship with emotions, I've been able to shift from this completely disempowered state of emotional dysregulation and sort of dysregulation in a holistic sense. So that's like spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically, overwhelmed, dysregulated, and misaligned. I've been able to, it's just about a process of pivoting and removing the blocks and letting go of the stories and shifting the emotion that is not serving me. And now I'm very, very stoked to be able to exist in mostly an aligned state. But like I said, we're human beings, so I will go into these. Sorry, if I said, mostly an aligned state, but as a human being, I'm inevitably going to shift back into misaligned states, but I'm very sensitive to feeling misaligned now. And I have a pretty good awareness of, practicing compassion, but then also jumping in the driver's seat, creating space for me to sort of dig up what's put me into misalignment, whether that's a trigger, some unresolved emotions, a story I'm holding on to. And it's wild because I've been able to increase my emotional capacity, and it's not actually like the triggers are less potent now. I've moved absolute fucking mountains of doubt and fear and anxiety over the last month and few months. So like I said, the triggers aren't less potent or less strong. I've just been able to increase my capacity to move through these absolute mountains of inner misalignment. And I can actually do that really, really quickly now. And at the time that I'm recording this episode, it is January 2025, and it has been a wild and wacky time when it comes to the collective energy. So sometimes the emotional overwhelm or the misalignment that you're experiencing actually has nothing to do with you, but we're all energetically sensitive beings, and there's a lot happening on a collective level. So sometimes we absorb that anxiety or the fear or whatever's going on in that collective level. But again, it comes back to taking responsibility for our relationship and or experience with that and moving through that back to a place of alignment. So this self-paced course that I've developed and released yesterday, I heavily attribute to my ability to do that now. So yeah, I'm just wanted to record this episode just to sort of create a bit more of a conversation and or education around what emotional alchemy is. So basically, emotional alchemy is just a really fancy way of explaining the process of transmuting emotion, like heavy, unresolved emotions, into a place of wisdom, actionable actions, and growth. And sometimes it's not actually a mental clarity that you receive. Sometimes the emotions are being triggered, or it's put you into a state of misalignment or overwhelm because you simply need to move back to somatic or body-based practices to move them through your body. Because like I said, if we're moving through life at all times and you've had, a shitty childhood or shitty relationships or whatever, we're building up all of these unresolved emotions. And if you're not creating the time to have a loving awareness and presence with these emotions, they're just going to build up in your body. And I hate to say it, but it's true. If you aren't dealing with these emotions, they will eventually physically manifest as dis-ease, because dis-ease in your body. And like I said, we're holistic beings. It's all about finding your unique relationship with alignment, not just for your emotional health, but also for your physical health. So yeah, heavy disclaimer, but we need to be learning how to deal with our emotions because they're not actually running the show. Our emotions are not us. They are our experiences, and they're messengers. They're letting you know where you are at. Where's your emotional health at? And like I said, it can come from a mental thing, so a story that you need to let go of. It can come from a physical buildup from not being, not slowing down enough to be present with your emotions. And then also emotions can build up when there's a misalignment with our spiritual intelligence, which is basically our understanding that we are not our thoughts and we are not our emotions, and that there is a part of ourselves, a higher expression of ourselves, and you might want to call it our spirit or our soul or your higher self or your pure essence, whatever label you need to put on it. But basically, so many of us are walking around with this complete disconnection from this higher expression of ourselves. And in actual fact, that is the part of ourselves that's running the show. But we're so identified with our emotions and with our thoughts that we completely disconnect. So when you're experiencing emotional triggers or emotional overwhelm, it can also be a sign that your spiritual intelligence is either disconnected or in a state of misalignment. So I don't know if this has been enough of a disclaimer that increasing your emotional intelligence through emotional alchemy work is super important. And it's just so empowering because we walk around feeling scared of our emotions. And that's actually another symptom of being in a misaligned place through our emotions is, like I've mentioned, it can be a dysregulated state with our nervous system. But also, if we're not taking the time to improve our emotional health, we can move into a state of dissociation, which again comes from nervous system dysregulation, an overactive mind, and identifying with our thoughts, and our inability to be present with our emotions. So we can go into these dissociative states, which basically means we're trying to distract ourselves from being present with ourselves, and it's just so backwards. Like I spent so much of my life running away from myself, and just by having the courage to sit with the discomfort, which is only temporary, I've been able to reconnect with that soul essence within myself. And now I can genuinely feel comfortable and feel safe with my inner experience. And when we do that, it brings us into a higher vibration. And then when it comes to the manifestation piece, our external world starts to reflect this higher vibration of our inner world. So yeah, that's another symptom that you're in a misaligned state, is if you find yourselves dissociating. And dissociating is, like I said, not being able to be in the present moment. We've got rampant thoughts running all the time. We're just like this, really reactive person all the time. Like, it's like your cup is full of water. And so if one person pours one tiny drop into that cup of water, you overflow all the fucking time. And I basically existed in that state for the majority of my life until I've really stepped into the driver's seat of, becoming the best version of myself and committing to being an aligned individual. And now I've got the practices and self-compassion and confidence to empty my cup when needed. So I'm building this resilience for life, because we live in this overly stimulating society, but it's not about trying to change the external experience. Well, in some ways it is. So it's like, instead of sitting on your phone and dissociating for 3 hours, go for a walk. So there is this external experience, but basically the real power comes from shifting yourself and embracing yourself and becoming the best version of yourself. And then you have more resilience for the craziness that is life. Like, basically, it's not your responsibility to completely shift this collective experience, because I'm sure I don't need to give you the disclaimer that shit's pretty fucked at the moment, socially, economically, politically, everything. And that's totally okay. We have some part to play in it, but it's not your responsibility to change everything around you before you're meant to feel better within yourself. Like, it's even to me saying that sounds so fucking exhausting and just like a complete waste of our time and energy. So I feel like it's super important to become the best versions of ourselves. And that's not through a process of rejecting ourselves until we feel aligned. Like, and acceptance is a huge part of our emotional intelligence and alchemy journey. But in my experience, as I become a more aligned version of myself and regulated and happy and, empowered, it's bringing this sense of resilience and increasing my capacity to navigate the world, because we're all a part of this world, but it's just not your sole responsibility to make everything better before you show up for yourself. Does that make sense? So I just wanted to touch on sort of the blocks that men and women can have towards befriending their emotions. So if you've pressed play on this episode, you're probably feeling like your emotions are a threat, they're a hindrance, and they're your foe. But basically, I want to encourage you to realize that our friends are just loving messengers. Our friends. Our emotions are friends and just loving messengers that just want to be heard and witnessed, and sometimes shifted and sometimes alchemized, etc. But every emotional experience that we have is unique, but this emotional alchemy course that I have created is a repeatable process to help you move through any of these emotions. Does that make sense? So our emotions are common. They have like sort of a common theme of what they require of us, but they are a unique experience and they vary in intensity and everything. But this course that I've created is something that can become a part of your spiritual tool belt, and you can come back to time and time again to shift those emotions. And as I mentioned, I realized that it's not like you get rid of the emotional backlog and then you experience less emotion throughout your life. You're actually, as you become a more aligned and empowered version of yourself, you're actually navigating bigger waves of emotion, but they don't last as long. They're not as dysregulating because you have the capacity, self-compassion, and education to move through them. So yeah, like I said, at the time I'm recording this, it is 2025 and there's just some wild energies out there. So sometimes the energy you're experiencing actually isn't anything to do with your personal experience. We're just energetically sensitive beings and we're absorbing that. But I have observed myself through January 2025. And like I said, I've lived in my studio for 1 month now. So it's just been a grounding exercise, but also a grounding exercise for my personal experiences. but also there's this wild, wacky collective energy. And I have been moving absolute inner mountains emotionally, but doing it with so much more ease and so much more confidence. And the duration of the dysregulation or the overwhelm is so much shorter now. Like I can alchemize something while I'm doing my groceries and move back to a place of alignment like that. Did you hear my click? So sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent there, but I will get back to what is a block for men and women. But I just wanted to sort of roll with this tangent because how do we know if we're in alignment and how do we know if we're in misalignment? It's pretty simple. It's basically how good you're feeling. As a holistic being, alignment feels like you are relaxed. Sorry. Oh, excuse me. A lot coming up. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm back. Alignment feels like you're feeling good, and you're not feeling good because of superficial conditions. Like I feel good because I got promoted today. That's great that you feel good, but that wave of high vibrational emotions will only be temporary because you've just been promoted. So it might last for a week or 6 months or whatever. But true, authentic alignment is when you are feeling good for no particular reason. And feeling good, what does that mean? Feeling good means you're feeling safe to be in your body. You're feeling regulated in your nervous system. Your thoughts, like your mind and your thoughts are not basically a horror movie that are playing out. Your emotions are feeling safe to be witnessed and you're not identifying with them. You are identifying them as the loving messengers that they are. And then spiritually, you're just feeling present. You're feeling connected to something bigger than yourself. You're not feeling in this deep place of like needing to control everything because you understand your relationship with life and with the universe or with God, whatever label you need to put on this higher power. But I'm pretty sure you can't deny that there is a higher power at play. So getting into this juicy alignment, it is just so delicious, guys. So that's what true, authentic alignment feels like when you just feel good for no particular reason. You've moved yourself energetically on into this higher space. Oh, sorry, I've got a bird like attacking. It must be attacking its reflection in the window, but I'm going to not get distracted by that. Yeah, and it's a really beautiful experience. And as I've harped on about in a lot of these episodes, is that, and the whole ethos behind my business, which is Oasis State. So Oasis State for me means finding your oasis state. What is your oasis state of being? So an oasis is like a gorgeous, lush, thriving environment. And that's the aim of my business, is to help you with tools, education, support, and guidance to create your unique oasis state of being within. And that basically is what alignment is. So when you are able to access and maintain your oasis state of being, you're actually operating on a higher frequency. So all of our emotions have frequencies, which that'll be another tangent I'll get down. But yeah, when you are in your oasis state of being or an alignment, your inner world is reflected in your outer world. But I think a lot of us get it wrong and we try to run around and change everything around us. We're trying to manifest and make all these changes in our lives from a place of lack. But the energy that you are taking these actions from or manifesting from will only create results that are on that same emotional frequency. So if you're creating from a place of lack, you will manifest things and you will take action, but it will just repeat the experience of your inner world. So that's why emotional alchemy is incredibly important, because it's getting us back to that higher vibrational frequency, and any action that we take or anything that we naturally manifest into our world, which is, again, we become quite magnetic when we are in a higher state of authentic alignment, and we're just naturally magnetizing experiences into our lives. So from personal experience, I'm letting you know that by being courageous enough to increase your emotional intelligence and your emotional health, everything gets easier and your outer world just starts to reflect the beautiful, nourishing, balanced, enjoyable, high vibrational experience that you're having within. So that is what true inner alignment is. And then I'm sure I don't need to let you know what misalignment feels like, because it's such an uncomfortable experience. You will experience nervous system dysregulation, so your fight or flight, which is basically your mind and your body are constantly scanning your environment and your situations, your relationships, your conversations, your past, your present, your future. You get the idea. It is constantly scanning for danger because that's the state that it's in. So emotional alchemy work moves you from that dysregulated, misaligned state back into an aligned state. And basically you're not spending all of your time and energy looking for the threat anymore, because usually the threat is actually just a buildup of unprocessed emotions or an emotional trigger that you're not aware of. So this emotional alchemy course that I've created basically just helps you create an inner safety, an inner like harbor, I don't know why I want to say harbor, of safety within you. So yeah, misalignment feels very uncomfortable. You feel very unsafe. As I mentioned before with the whole water cup analogy, you're very, very reactive because you're in a misaligned state. So we're holistic beings, and if everything's out of whack, we're constantly again in this state of perceived danger. So you're incredibly reactive. So I think I've sort of, covered those points now of what misalignment feels like. And unfortunately, so many of us are walking around in these misaligned states. But the more tragic part is that we feel disempowered about the misalignment, when in actual fact, if we just start educating ourselves and being intentional and being proactive about creating spaces to move through that dysregulation and misalignment, we can actually come to this beautiful, authentic, aligned space, which feels very safe, very empowered, very enjoyable, full of pleasure, full of excitement, full of joy, and it's all unconditional. So yeah, I hope all of that stuff that I just blabbered on about is inviting you to shift your perception of where you should be prioritizing your time and energy, because so many of us are running around in these misaligned states trying to control everything around us. And like I said, all of that action and control that we take from that energetic expression of those lower vibrations of fear, control, doubt, anxiety, low self-worth, unfortunately is just going to create more scenarios that is amplifying that experience. So you might be like, no, I'm so scared to sit with my emotions, or I don't have time. And there might be all of these like excuses or fear coming up. But doesn't it feel way more constructive to just lean into being more intentional with our emotional health journey and our holistic health journey? But the whole idea is that I think like one of the loudest symptoms of misalignment is emotional overwhelm. So that's why I'm sort of focusing this episode on that being the kingpin. Because it just, in my experience, and, in my experience, it's just so much more constructive to sit with a little bit of temporary discomfort rather than inner discomfort. And it really is only temporary. Like I said, I have been so far down the bandwidth of misalignment, and I've slowly just pivoted back to this place of alignment now. And I can very confidently say that I exist in this place of alignment. I'm very sensitive to misalignment now. And I'm also incredibly confident about all of the tools, education, a commitment that I have to using everything that is available to me to move back into a place of alignment. And I'm only 33 years old. So as I grow, age and grow as a person, I will just get more and more tools and tips and understandings of myself. And the hope is that I will be able to live in a place of alignment, true, authentic alignment for longer periods of time. But like I said, it's a compassion piece and realizing that we're human beings and we're messy and we're multifaceted. So the misalignment and the triggers will come along, and that is completely fine. Okay, so 2 other things I want to talk about before I wrap up this episode is, and I went on that huge tangent for however long that was, but for women, we are feeling factories. We are so emotionally sensitive. We are so tapped into our bodies. But unfortunately, after, years of suppression and, physical safety and, sexual danger that we've experienced, like whether it's our ancestors or in our lives, we've basically disconnected from this beautiful body-based wisdom that we have and emotional sensitivity. And that's why you might be feeling a fear or a block around sitting with your emotions, because women are constantly, when you become a conscious woman and a gorgeous empowered queen, that whole journey is basically about deconditioning from the story, the trauma, the mistreatment that we've had about being too much. And most of the time, the too much is because we've been too emotional. But I am here on I'm here on a mission to empower women to become the embodied, highly sensitive queens that we are, but not from this dysregulated place. It's like we can be these emotionally sensitive beings and feel safe and not project those emotions onto other people, and actually use them as the superpowers that they are, the loving messengers that they are, and use them to the best of our ability. And men. So, I shouldn't be calling, I suppose I can call it men and women, but I just want to give a disclaimer that this could also be, if you don't identify with being a man or a woman, we as energetic beings all have a balance of masculine and feminine energy within us. And a lot of women are dominant in their feminine energy, and a lot of men are dominant in their masculine energy. And depending on what you identify as, regardless of what you identify as in a gender sense, you will have a dominant masculine, you will resonate with being dominant in your masculine or feminine energy. And again, that's up to you to be empowered in your emotional intelligence journey and identify what this masculine and feminine energy means for you. And I can do an episode on that. Let me know if you want an episode on masculine and feminine energy. So that was just a little disclaimer. But men, and a lot of men identify with being masculine dominant, are moving through blocks and trauma around not being enough. So women are moving through that experience of being too much, and men are moving through their blocks and trauma around not being enough. And then that has caused them to not, to sort of have like a deep lack of safety around experiencing their emotions. And this is another tangent I can go on, but a lot of men have a mother wound where they don't feel safe or valued to create emotional safety for themselves. And it's important that we are it's not a female's responsibility, but it's important as a collective society that we're also nurturing men to tap into their emotional experience, because basically women are highly intuitive, and we are awakening and ascending and all of that a lot faster than men. So we need to encourage men to come into that healthy masculine, or that balance of feminine masculine, but that healthy masculine to catch up with women, because we need a lot more divine and sacred unions, because we're definitely reaching this point on a collective level where we can't go as far anymore on our individual journeys. And it's not about getting lost in, connections, divine unions or connections. It doesn't have to be an intimate connection. It can be, just a soul connection or platonic. But we're definitely moving into this era now of realizing we cannot do this alone anymore. And honestly, wanting to do a lot of life alone is a bit of a trauma response as well. And that could be a whole nother episode. That's sort of the collective energy that's been coming through, is that we need a lot more divine unions, because we're coming together and healing a lot of the masculine and feminine imbalances. Like I said, we're all yin and yang. Like one person has a balance of yin and yang, which is masculine and feminine energy. But that's why men need to be doing this emotional alchemy process as well, is because they need to sort of, sorry lads, but catch up with women. And a lot of these divine unions are coming along to sort of, on a collective level, accelerate. That's the word I've been looking for. Accelerate our conscious journey. So this is really important stuff, basically. So they're the blocks that men and women, or masculine dominant, feminine dominant people are moving through. They're the blocks and the traumas that they're moving through, and why you might not feel safe or like you want to prioritize emotional health, but an emotional intelligence, which is done through emotional alchemy work. But it is really, really important. And as I mentioned, if you're just walking around with your head in the sand, trying to, control life around you to feel some temporary conditional experience of alignment, it's so exhausting. So sitting with a little bit of internal discomfort is the way to go, is absolutely the way to go. Okay, and what else I wanted to talk about was what our emotions actually are. And I love, this is one of those things where spirituality and science are like pairing together, and it's like, in my mind's eye right now I can see that like two snakes winding together, which is actually yin and yang energy. But basically science has been able to identify that all emotions are vibrations all emotions have a unique vibrational frequency that are measured by hertz. So when you're experiencing lower vibrational emotions, so I don't need to give that disclaimer, but they're on the lower scale of our emotional experience. So things like fear, doubt, shame, guilt, all of those things, they literally are measured as lower hertz, and they, as in like frequency hertz. And they actually, I don't need to, give you a disclaimer about this, but they are not a very comfortable experience. They're a valuable part of life, but you don't need to exist on these frequencies at all time. You can be an empowered, proactive person and actually shift to these higher vibrational frequencies of unconditional love, gratitude, joy, confidence, you name it. They are actually higher vibrational experiences. And this emotional alchemy course that I have developed is basically just a process of helping you move from those heavier, denser, lower vibrational emotions to a higher vibrational emotional experience. And how will you know that you're on a higher vibrational experience? Like I said, it's alignment. It just feels better. And it's not this like inauthentic, temporary, better feeling. It just, in your mind, body, soul, holistically feels fucking fantastic. So yeah, sorry. I think that's all I really want to talk about today. I'm just going to have a think about if there's anything else I want to talk about. Oh yeah. So basically, if you haven't realized, I've developed an emotional alchemy course. And also if you go to my website, which I'll link in the show notes. Oh God, that's such a cringy thing to say now on, well, it's cringy in my experience. So many podcasters say it, but hey, that's where you find our info. In the show notes, I'll link my website. And if this episode has intrigued you, I've also created a free guide. So it's basically like a very basic intro to emotional alchemy. You can download that free guide if you're still on the fence about adding my emotional alchemy course to cart. But yeah, basically it is a really, really potent and valuable tool to use. So if you're interested in going down this rabbit hole that is emotional alchemy, all of the information will be in the show notes. And just before we wrap up this episode, I want to give a personal experience of this emotional alchemy process, because you might be like, oh, but what will it feel like, etc. And basically, I just want to share my personal experience that anytime I have been, quotation marks, brave enough to sit down and be present with my emotions and alchemize them from the lower vibration to the higher vibration, it's never been as scary as I thought. So this is your disclaimer that your mind, because your mind is just trying to keep you safe at all times. So if you've never sat with your emotions, of course it's going to, because your mind keeps you safe through predictability. So if you've never sat with your emotions, it's going to be like, no, dissociate. But so that's what I'm saying. Your mind will try and trick you into not sitting with your emotions out of a fear of you not being safe. But through my personal experience, every single time I just sit with my emotions, it is never as scary as I think it would be. So this is your reminder that it is way, way easier than you expect. And yeah, basically, when you're sitting with this emotional alchemy process, there will be some, like I said, there will be some mental mental processing. So you can have a journal beside you and write out how you're feeling. Sometimes you'll get to the bottom of a limiting belief or a story that you've been holding on to. But basically, a lot of your emotional alchemy process is like a body-based process. And when I sort of was identifying this process that I've developed in my course, I realized that I just wasn't being present enough with my body. And it was all of these emotions are just messengers that were screaming at me to just witness them. It's like your emotions are basically like little children. And if you're not giving them attention after a certain amount of time, they're going to have a fucking tantrum. So when you sit down with this emotional alchemy process, it's like you're being a loving mother or father or parent sitting with these emotions that just want your attention. They just want your love and acceptance and to be witnessed. And that's all it needs to be. And you may cry when you're going through this process, which is actually when you cry, it's actually your nervous system regulating. It's a nervous system regulation practice. So if you are doing emotional alchemy work, whether it's through my course or just in your own practices, just be mindful that it's not actually, you don't actually need to have a story or a mental understanding of what you go through. Sometimes you just need to have a physical release, which can be through tears, can be through anger, yelling, screaming, sighing, yawning, whatever it is. So I know I said I was going to share my personal experience, but actually don't need to. This is sort of my personal experience. It's not like a story. So yeah, it's so cathartic. That's what I want to say. It is so fucking cathartic. So make sure you're creating a safe, nurturing place of solitude to move through this. And actually as well, like bonus points for you doing this work, whether it's my course or in your own processes, in front of the mirror, because it's very cliche, but our eyes are the window to our soul, and they're the window to like a deeper connection with ourselves. And like I said, our emotions are just messengers. So if you're taking the time to do mirror work or use the mirror looking into your eyes as you're doing emotional alchemy work, rapid fire way to move through everything. So yeah, it's just an unmatched process, guys. It is, I don't know if the last 40 minutes of me talking has been enough of a disclaimer to sit with this, but it is just absolutely revolutionary. For women, it's about shifting our perception of our emotional sensitivity, of it being a threat to being actually a superpower. And for men, it's so important for their spiritual development. And like I said, all of this divine union stuff is coming along, and it is so, so important. So yeah, I think I'm rambling now. I'm going to wrap up the episode, but I hope this has inspired you to take some time to be present with your emotions. And I promise you that they are not a threat. They're not a foe. They're just actually your friends that just want to be loved and witnessed and accepted. So yay. Until next time, guys, I love you so much and have a great day. And I'm rambling. Okay, bye. Hey, beautiful soul. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Oasis.state podcast. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with a friend. It means the world to me knowing that everyone who needs this medicine and magic can lovingly receive it. Also, I'd love to hear from you, so feel free to reach out via social media, my website, or email. Can't wait to connect, and until then, sending you heaps of love.